must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for finding time to being with us this afternoon. My name is Miriam Oguto. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, where I get to bring you the latest from the continent of Africa. And indeed, a lot is happening today. So let me bring us up to date with the latest. And we shall start with Ethiopia. And rebel forces in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region have taken its capital, Mekele, sparking street celebrations and forcing officials to flee. The residents reported scenes of joy with fireworks and thousands waving flags. The government, which took Mekele in November after Tigrayan forces rejected political reforms and captured army bases, has now called a humanitarian ceasefire. In the region, the fighting has left thousands dead and has pushed 350,000 people towards famine. More than 2 million people have been displaced. An advisor to the former ruling administration in Tigray has told the BBC that the Ethiopian army has suffered a devastating defeat. In the regional capital, Mekele, there has been victory celebrations, as I said there, after the rebels captured it in a rapid offensive on Monday. The Ethiopian government has not confirmed the loss of the city, but has declared a unilateral ceasefire in the region. And Tigray's People Liberation Front TPLF advisor Feseha Tesema told the BBC that the changed situation meant international agencies could now bring urgently needed aid into Tigray. And then we head over to southern Africa, this time in Eswatini, and business owners in Eswatini's capital, Bambane, have closed their premises as police clash with demonstrators. The media from neighboring South Africa report that the army is in full control of Bambane, and some people have been barred from accessing the central business district. Eswatini government has denied reports that King Mswati has fled the country following clashes between security forces and demonstrators. The king was reported to have fled the country following clashes between the security forces and demonstrators protesting against the absolute monarchy in the southern African country. The protests against the king, who ascended to the throne 35 years ago, began the weekend. The demonstrators are calling for King Mswati to step down as part of democratic reforms, including free elections. And then another country in the southern Africa, this time South Africa itself. And South Africa's Constitutional Court has sentenced the former President Jacob Zuma to 15 months in prison. The court, in a majority ruling, found Mr. Zuma guilty of contempt for failing to comply with the ruling of the court to appear before a panel that was investigating corruption allegations against him. Mr. Zuma denies involvement in a number of graft scandals. He was ousted as president in 2018 over allegations of mismanagement and systematic corruption. And then we head over to Zambia. Bars, taverns and casinos in Zambia have been closed as the government enforces new measures to prevent further spread of coronavirus. The health ministry had last week said that starting Monday, these entertainment sports would only operate during weekends. Matthew Ngulube, a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Local Government, said on Monday that the authorities had reviewed that directive and noted a non-compliance, hence closing all bars and casinos. The closure will be in effect for 14 days, but during that time, the stores will be allowed to sell alcohol on takeaway basis. Schools were closed last week for 21 days to allow administrations to put in place preventative measures. And we go to the DRC, the Central African Republic, and Russian instructors sent to the Central African Republic have cried out indiscriminate killings, lootings, and occupied schools, and that is according to an annual United Nations report, though Moscow says they are unarmed and not involved in the fighting. The testimonies detail excessive force, which amounts to violations of international humanitarian law. The report by United Nations experts submitted to the Security Council recently, as seen by AFP on Monday, said such violations by FACS soldiers in the Central African Armed Forces and Russian instructors included cases of excessive use of force, indiscriminate killings, the occupation of schools, and looting on a large scale, including of humanitarian organizations. The report, as said, the experts received numerous reports of cases of indiscriminate killings against unarmed civilians by Russian instructors. The report also added, noting that their presence in the mining regions of the Central African Republic was causing a discomfort to the residents there. And we go to South Sudan. The government has requested mediators to reschedule the peace talks with holdout groups until Independence Day celebrations. According to the Minister of Presidential Affairs, President Salva Kiir has asked St. Egidio to allow the parties to first mark the 10th independence anniversary. Dr. Barnaba Mariel, who often heads the government delegations, has been assigned to organize the 9th July festivals. In a letter to the St. Egidio, a Catholic community in Italy, Dr. Mariel assured the mediators of the government's commitment to the talks but called for rescheduling. It is not clear when the talks were to resume. The St. Gidio Catholic community based in Rome, Italy, started the mediation between the government and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, or SOMA, in November 2019. The coalition is led by Thomas Cirillo, Paul Malong, Pagan Amum, among others. In January this year, a meeting between the government and holdout groups led by Pagan Amum and Paul Mulang was postponed. This came following a division among South Sudan Opposition Alliance leaders in Rome peace last year. The SOMA group broke away after an allegation of undisclosed talks between the government in Cuba and the group led by Paul Malong. This made Pagan Amum, Paul Malong, among others, walk out from the Rome talks. And the African Union has expressed concern over exclusion of COVID-19 vaccine widely used in Africa in a new European Union passport system. According to AU, the EU intends to issue green pass only to vaccines that have been received EU-wide marketing EU market-wide authorization. That means that only Astrazenica vaccine produced and authorized in Europe is included, while the same formation of the vaccine produced under license by the Serum Institute of India is excluded. The AU argued that under such regulations, persons who received a Covishield, despite being able to demonstrate proof of vaccination, would continue to be subject to public health restrictions, including limitations of movement and testing requirements. And then we head over to Zimbabwe, and 2 decades after seizing land from white commercial farmers for distribution to black Zimbabweans' quarters under controversial agricultural reforms, the government is now taking back sizable chunks of it from the beneficiaries for the distribution. Ironically, it appears the first victims are the family of the late President Robert Mugabe, the initiator of the reforms. President Emerson Mnangagwa's government says it is downsizing commercial farms to ensure maximum utilization of land, but those targeted say the agrarian reforms are once again being used to punish the ruling party's critics. Some of the most prominent disgruntled beneficiaries are Mr. Mugabe's daughter, Bona, and her husband, Simbarashe Mutsahuni, who have gone to court to block the government from redistributing part of their vast farm. The couple accuses the government of unilaterally seizing vast tracts of land from the farm they were allocated in 2017 without considering their investment into the property and utilization. Their property, which measures about 1,804 acres, is in the prime farming district of Mazowe, where Mugabe and his wife Grace were believed to have grabbed several farms from white commercial farmers at the height of his rule. And then we go to Libya, and Saif al-Islam Gadafi, son of the late Libyan autocrat Muammar Gadafi, hasn't been seen in public since his rebel captor released him from the detention in 2017, but he appears now to be mulling a run for a presidency of the war-torn North African country in elections the United Nations and Western powers are pressing for in December. The prospect of Saif figuring in the elections is unnerving Western diplomats and international democracy advisors, who say Libya's troubled peace process has enough major obstacles to overcome without Gaddafi's concern a highly polarizing figure getting involved. Saif, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court on war crimes charges, has been talking via intermediaries with Western media. A major U.S. newspaper has conducted a formal interview with him, which is slated for publication next month, intermediaries say. Saif candidacy would likely prove popular in the desert south of the country and among former Gaddafi's loyalists, and he might be able to persuade many ordinary Libyans exhausted by a decade of strife that he is the best bet for a stable future, and that is according to observers. And that is the latest from the continent this afternoon. So what is happening in the formerly known as Swaziland, now it's known as Eswatini, and from the reports that we were earlier receiving was that the king of Eswatini had fled the country and had gone to, I think some news outlets were saying he had gone to Johannesburg in South Africa, but according to an official communication from the office of the king or the government of Eswatini, they are saying the king is well and good there. King Mswati III is in Bambani, the capital city of Eswatini. But now, Eswatini, in case you don't know, Eswatini, the way it's being led right now, the king, I was shocked to learn, is an absolute monarch. He's an absolute monarch, meaning that any decree he makes, that is the law. And so that has been a problem, especially with the younger generation who are now looking and seeking for change, because in the 21st century, when you're seeing all these protests across the world, people yearning for democracy and good governance and, certain ways of holding government accountable, and you're here stuck with a monarch who perhaps even how he leads is not in line with, does not respond quite well to the issues in the 21st century. So on Monday evening, Eswatini's leading chain store, OK Foods, located in Matsapa, and other outlets were set on fire. And it is according to some story I was reading yesterday, that this food chain, I think it's owned, some of the businesses owned by the king were the ones which were being targeted by these protesters. Others were burnt down, others were looted. And the country has been facing protest now for several days in at least 10 different places, forcing police to use tear gas and live ammunition to disperse demonstrators. And so, as I mentioned there, the Eswatini leader rules the country as an absolute monarch and appoints the prime minister, the ministers, judges, and civil servants. And of course, the protesters are calling for political reforms and want to elect their own prime minister. They're saying, at least even if you have a king, since you borrowed this democracy, this governance structure from UK. Remember, Eswatini was a colony of British. Since you borrowed this, we've seen the Queen just stay there in her palace, and when it's important for her to sign something or say something, that's when she'll come out. But the country is being governed by the Prime Minister when it comes to the political governance there. And the people have a right and directly decide on who they want to be the Prime Minister, according to the UK democracy there. But in Eswatini, the leader gets to choose, the king, Mswati III, gets to choose who will be the prime minister. So he appoints the prime minister, ministers, even judges and civil servants. He appoints the judges. You appoint the prime minister, you appoint the judges, who, of course, I believe will be loyalists to the kingdom. And also, on top of that, you appoint civil servants without... There's no accountability. There's no way you can, the people of Eswatini have, a voice or have a say in how some of these appointments are even carried out. As I think that must have angered, especially I think the younger generation there in Swaziland or Eswatini. And so this is what a lot of them were saying. Now the protesters are calling for political reforms. And the political parties have been banned in the country since 1973. Okay, so maybe you're wondering if political parties have been burned from Eswatini since 1973. So how does their democracy work there? And just a bit of background information. And the government is an absolute monarchy ruled by King Mswati III. Since 1986, elections are held every 5 years to determine the House of Assembly and the Senate majority. The current constitution was adopted in 2005, and the Umalanga, the reed dance held in August and September, and the Intwala, that is the kingship dance held in December and January. These are the only nation's most important events, those two dances. Really? The rest of us in the continent are struggling with serious issues of insecurity. Right, we have important dates that in our calendars that reminds us of our independence, reminds us of very important events in our countries, and you only have two important events in your calendar, Eswatini, and they're all marked with reed dances. It's just a dance event. This is quite interesting, isn't it? Now, the parliament in Eswatini, the Swazi, it's a bicameral parliament, or Libandla, consisting of 30 senators. No, consisting of the Senate and the House of Assembly. And the Senate has 30 seats, 10 members appointed by the House of Assembly and 20 appointed by the monarch to serve a 5-year term. And the House of Assembly has 65 seats, and 10 members appointed by the monarch and 55 elected by a popular vote to serve for 5 years, for 5-year term. Now, the election are held every 5 years after dissolution of Parliament by the King. The last elections were held on the 18th of August 2000 to the 18th of August to the 21st of September 2018. Now, the balloting is done in a non-partisan manner. All election procedures are overseen by the Elections and Boundaries Commission, so the electoral body in Eswatini. And quite interesting. Now, at Swaziland's independence on the 6th of September in 1963, Swaziland adopted a Westminster-style constitution like that one in the UK. And on 12th of April 1973, King Sobhuza II annulled it by decree. He said, "My word is law. We're just going to rubbish this Westminster-style kind of a constitution." And that happened in 1973, assuming supreme powers in all executive, judicial, and legislative matters. Now, the first non-party elections for the House of Assembly was held in 1978, and they were conducted under the Tinkundla as electoral constituencies determined by the King, and established an electoral committee appointed by the King to supervise elections. Until the 1993 election, the ballot was not secret. Voters were not registered. This works like a jungle. So the ballot was not secret, and there was no voter registration. So you could not say, according to the statistics and according to the register of voters who have been registered to vote, we have this amount of registered voters who will participate in these elections. Then out of that, you can say maybe 70% of that turned out to vote, right? But in Eswatini, at that time, they did not even have the voter register. So the voters were not registered, and they did not elect representatives directly. Instead, voters elected an electoral college. So they brought in the Westminster. Okay, fine, they got rid of the Westminster, and now they brought in what we see in the US. So now they have the electoral college. Okay, I guess it gets more interesting. And now the electoral committee, all right, so the first, hold on, the elections are held every 5 years. So anyway, the balloting, the last elections, as I said, were held in the 18th of August, and in August and September in 2018, and they conducted under the Tinkundla as electoral constituencies determined by the King. All right, and until the 1993 election, that is where I think I was trying to look for, the ballot was not secret, voters were not registered, and they did not elect representatives directly in state, voters elected an electoral college by passing through a gate designated for the candidate of choice while officials counted them. Okay, let me help us understand what I'm saying here. Voters were not registered, right? And they elected an electoral college, and this is how they did it. A gate was closed. People would, people would enter. Then a gate was closed, and so as you enter and you pass through the gate, I guess you decide who you're voting for, and then it's counted. So it's counted. So 1, 2, 3, whatever, you're saying you're voting for this person in the electoral college, the people who will be included in the electoral college. So I don't know if they had that indelible, ink that will show that you voted, or you just passed and you're counted. And if you wanted to go 6, 3, 2, 3, 5, 6, times, you could do it. This is just ridiculous. While officials counted them as you passed through the designated gate, right? Later on, a constitutional review commission was appointed by King Mswati III in July 1996, comprising chiefs, political activists, and unionists to consider public submissions and draft proposals for a new constitution. Now, this is how the judiciary works. The judicial system in Eswatini is a dual system. And in 2006, the constitution established a court system based on the Western model, consisting of 4 regional magistrates' court, a high court, a court of appeal, and that will be the Supreme Court, which are independent of crown control. In addition, traditional courts, Swazi courts or customary courts, deal with minor offences and violations of traditional Swazi law and custom. So how will these courts be independent if they are entirely, if these judges, I think, are serving under the mercy of the king? I think the independence there is very subjective, I believe. And later on, the Constitutional Review Commission was appointed by King Mswati III, as I said there, to review and make a new constitution. All right. So in 2006, Constitution established a court-based system, and I've explained there, judges are appointed by the king and are usually expatriates from South Africa. So not even their own judges. They just bring judges. They just bring in judges from South Africa. Do they not have law schools in Eswatini? Now, the Supreme Court, which replaced the previous Court of Appeal, consists of the Chief Justice and at least 4 other Supreme Court judges. The High Court consists of the Chief Justice and at least 4 High Court judges. And the military, of course, is used primarily during domestic protests. Here we will use police or another group called the GSU, and but there they will bring in, like right now I was watching some images from Bambane, the capital of Eswatini, and you would see the military on the ground. So the military, their main use is for to quell domestic protest with some border and customs duty. The military has never been involved in a foreign conflict. Yeah, so they've never formed any troop to go as a peacekeeping mission in any other country outside of Eswatini. This is quite something, all right? And so anyway, the government has come out and said that King Mswati III did not flee from the country after the pro-democracy protest, that he's still there. And we'll see how that story continues to develop. Okay, so now something else that I need for us to talk about very shortly, the issue what is happening in Ethiopia. And as I told you there, Monday's development followed a recent reports of an escalation in fighting between government forces and the TPLF outside Mekele. Mekele is the capital of the Tigray region. That is the capital city of the Tigray region. And as I told you there, the government of Ethiopia right now has declared a unilateral ceasefire in its northern Tigray region after rebel fighters retook Mekele, the regional capital, following a nearly 8 months of conflict that the United Nations says has pushed over 350,000 people to the brink of famine. And I think we've been reporting this story in what is happening in Tigray, and as government forces, together with those of Eritrea, are continued to even blockade and fight and maim and kill and rape and all that the people of Tigray the TPLF was fighting back to reclaim their territory and to get, these forces out of, that part. And so it has succeeded. And so now the government of Ethiopia is coming out and calling for a ceasefire. The world has been calling for a ceasefire. United Nations itself has been calling for a ceasefire. This war started in November last year and has continued now, claiming so many lives. It's impossible to get the exact figures because the Ethiopian government ensured a blackout. No media outlet was, allowed to get to Tigray and bring us exactly what is happening there in Tigray. So there has been a lot of blackout, and even humanitarian, help, aid was, the Eritrean forces and the Ethiopian forces refused for the aid to go into that area. And what I found to be quite interesting for me, the Tigrayan forces, they're saying now that we have gotten back a hold of the Mekele, that is the capital city of Tigray. Now aid can go to their people. So I guess they were fighting for their people to access, for the humanitarian aid to be able to access that region. And we know that Eritrean forces especially were the ones used to barricade the area and to refuse for that aid to go to the people who needed it. And so now they're saying our people now can get the help that they need. So now the Ethiopian government is coming out and calling for a unilateral ceasefire, while it has refused to listen to the calls before. It continued with its bombardment of that region. So after it was defeated, it is trying to save face and act as if it is the one which is coming with peace here. We've had enough, so let's just have some peace. And according to the social media, people had a lot of things to say over this, and people who have been following this story very closely. And they're saying, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, after that humiliating defeat, of course, the cost is way up there. You cannot put you cannot put a price tag on a human life. Even one person dying is way too much price to pay. And so many people have died in that region, so I cannot even begin to tell you. So really, nobody has won this war. But for what we know right now is Ethiopian forces were defeated, and the TPLF have reclaimed control of Mekele and the larger region in Tigray. And so Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, after that humiliating defeat, comes out to say, all right, now we call for a unilateral ceasefire, and now let's everybody put their weapons down. I don't know if he said people can come to the table and talk. I'm not sure he went to that extent, but he's now calling for a unilateral ceasefire. Now, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he had spoken to Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and was hopeful that an effective cessation of hostilities will take place. It is essential that civilians are protected, humanitarian aid reach the people in need, and political solution is found, Guterres said in a statement. The United Nations, Ireland, and Britain have called for emergency public United Nations Security Council meeting that could be held as early as Friday, diplomatic sources told the AFP news agencies. And of course, Western countries have not yet succeeded in organizing a public session on Tigray, with many African countries, China, Russia, and other nations deeming the crisis an internal Ethiopian affair. China, Russia, and other African countries. Rings a bell? Exactly. Now, Abiy ordered a group and air military operation in Tigray in early November 2020, accusing the TPLF of orchestrating attacks on federal army camps. The TPLF, which dominated national politics for decades until Abiy came to power in 2018, said it was the target of a coordinated attack by federal forces and its longtime foe, Eritrea. Abiy, the winner of 2019 Nobel Peace Prize, declared victory last November after the army entered Mekele. Fighting, however, has continued amid fears of a protracted conflict with devastating effects on civilian population. All right. And I'm beginning to think that there could be other forces. I don't know from where yet, but I'm suspecting there could be other forces that are aiding the TPLF. Remember, TPLF was in power for a very long time until Abiy Ahmed came into power in 2018. And I think just a couple of weeks ago, Abiy Ahmed declared TPLF, which was a ruling party for a long time, has declared it a terrorist group, all right, and illegal, so it was banned. So essentially, you cannot even run for any position in that country with that party. So they were fighting that. But I am suspecting there are some powers, there are some countries, there are some other interests that are aiding and that are backing up the TPLF army. I can't place my finger anywhere right now, but I am sure over time as this story continues. Remember, at the start of this war last year in November, and there were accusations that Eritrea was participating in this genocide that was ongoing, President Isaias Afwerki came out and said, no way, Eritrea is not involved. And then just 3 months ago, there were, indeed reports that, said that Eritrea is involved, and there was proof of that. All right. So even with this TPLF, I'm sure there are some forces behind it. There are some forces, countries, individuals, I don't know, some interest from whatever it is that are supporting. Because even when you see how the Western powers have been handling these cases, this conflict. It's just the other day that the US, the UK, the European Union, they come in so late, and they're very reluctant, and they're not very quick to even give sanctions. That happened, and it was not as punitive as we would see in other parts of Africa when things like this happen. So, and that told me a lot. There's more to it. There's more to it than just meet the eye. All right, very well. So the government of South Sudan has requested mediators to reschedule the peace talks with holdout groups until the Independence Day celebrations. So they are marking the 10th Independence Day celebrations. South Sudan is marking the 10th Independence celebrations on the 9th of July. And so they were saying, the mediators could reschedule these peace talks that are supposed to be resuming there in Rome. 10 years. What are you celebrating, President Salva Kiir? What are you celebrating? I understand it's an important day in the calendar of South Sudan, and I agree it's very important. We celebrate Independence Day here every year. But this should be a time that you reflect. This should be a time that you really take stock on your contribution to the ongoing instability in South Sudan. This is the time that you take a retrospect and see how can we learn, if at all, how can we learn from the past, and how can we now start doing things differently? Because what we've been doing for the last 10 years is not working for the people of South Sudan. So outside of those celebrations that you're planning for the Independence Day, I think if I were you, because South Sudan does not even have the money to organize for an elaborate Independence Day celebrations, from what we know, your coffers are dry, your public coffers, right? You don't have money. So this will be the time that you really, really take your time. And perhaps you should have attended, the peace talks, and see how you get South Sudan out of this quagmire that you and your cronies have put South Sudan through, and you have refused to allow the country to move forward. There is a very, the revitalized peace agreement that you had in 2018. Very important aspects of that agreement has not been implemented, and that has been a worry for a lot of stakeholders and people who have been of goodwill and have been supporting this process. All right. So I think there's no time for celebrations. What are you celebrating, President Salva Kiir? What are you leading the country to celebrate? The misery that the people of South Sudan continue to go through in refugee camps, the rapes, the killings, the communal conflicts that have continued. That is what you're going to celebrate 10 years in. South Sudan as a country, I think, no, you don't need celebrations. You need to sit down and get serious with implementing the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 and charter a better way forward for the future of South Sudan. Just my thoughts. There is nothing to celebrate. But 10 years, South Sudan being a country, it's important. But for now, not celebration, and on top of that, you're broke. So anyway, so quickly, former president of South Africa has been given a 15-month jail prison sentence because of contempt of court. Contempt of court is a very serious matter. You remember, so many times he refused to appear in front of this panel that was investigating corruption allegation against him when he was the president. Remember the Gupta family and others, mega scandals, money laundering, and a lot of other abuse of office related charges that were leveled against him. And so many times he was issued with to comply. He refused to comply, and so many times when he was required to go and appear before a panel that was investigating this. So they've said, okay, so you're a tough guy. So what we're going to do now, we're going to give you 15 months of prison, okay? And then I think after that, now they'll have the charges against corruption. So this is separate. And of course, the case against him on graft scandals that, there's so many of them. They have not concluded yet. They're still continuing. But in the meantime, he shall be serving 15 months over contempt of court for failing to comply with the ruling of the court to appear before a panel that was investigating corruption allegation against him. This is just new here in the continent. Okay, all right. I think I'll just leave that there for today, and then I will see you here tomorrow and see what else is happening in our lovely continent. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Mugutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.